Hi, my name is Karen, and I'm an American lay student of Ajahn Suchat, or Pra Ajahn Suchat Abhijato, who has given me the very special honor of being asked by him to record this book for you. This book was written by Pra Ajahn Suchat's own teacher, the Venerable Acariya Mun Nanasampanno, and is a spiritual biography written by him about his teacher, the Venerable Acariya Mun Biography. The title of the book is Venerable Acariya Mun Biography, a spiritual biography by Acariya Mun Nanasampanno, and it was published in 2005, translated into English by Bhikkhu Dick Silaratano. If you would like to learn how to download or get a hard copy of this book, or a list of which pages or chapters are read on each separate recording, please listen to the beginning of the first recording of this book. This book, in any form, is to be given away for free. Any ads you may see or hear in this recording have been put there by the platform you are using to listen or view with, for its own revenue, in exchange for letting us use their platform for free. Please forgive me for any mispronunciations of names, places, or words, as I'm still learning how to pronounce Thai and Pali, and for any background noises, as I'm just making these recordings in my apartment with an unruly dog and in the middle of a city. We're continuing today on page 136. We are in the last section of the second chapter titled An Impeccable Human Being, and we're starting at the last paragraph on page 136. Acariya Mun invariably liked to remain in and around mountains and forests for long periods of time. After having been in Nanasampanno for quite a while instructing the monks, he began to necessarily consider his own position. He often reflected on the nature of his own practice. He knew that he still lacked sufficient strength of purpose to finish the ultimate task before him. It became clear that as long as he continued to resist this call and remain teaching his disciples, his own personal striving would be delayed. He said that ever since he had returned from the Central Plains in order to instruct monks in the Northeast, he felt that his citta had not advanced as fast as when he was living alone. He felt that he had to accelerate his efforts once more before he could achieve the final goal and be free of all concerns about himself. At that time, Acariya Mun's mother had been living with him for 6 years as an upasika. His concern for her made it inconvenient for him to go anywhere. So, having secured her agreement, he decided to escort her to Udon Ratchathani. He then left Nanasampanno with his mother and a large following of monks and novices, cutting straight across the Nongsung Mountains through Kamchai, and coming out at the district of Lernakta in the province of Udon Ratchathani. That year he spent the rains retreat at Ban Nangkan in the Amnat Charan district of Udon Ratchathani province. Many monks and novices stayed there with him, and he trained them vigorously. While he was there, the number of monks and lay devotees who gained faith and came to train under him steadily increased. Late one evening, Acariya Mun sat in meditation, and as soon as his citta dropped into calm, a vision appeared of many monks and novices walking respectfully behind him in a nice, orderly fashion which inspired devotion. Yet there were other monks who hurried past, walking ahead of him without respect or self-control. Others looked for an opportunity to pass him in a completely undisciplined manner. And finally, there were some who held pieces of split bamboo, using them to pinch his chest so that he could hardly breathe. When he saw these different monks display such disrespect, even cruelly tormenting him, he focused his citta carefully to look into events of the future. Immediately, he understood that those who walked respectfully behind him in a nice, orderly fashion, which inspired devotion, were the monks who would conduct themselves properly, faithfully putting his teaching into practice. These were the monks who would revere him and uphold the sasana, assuring that it would flourish in the future. They would be able to make themselves useful to the sasana and to people everywhere by maintaining the continuity of traditional Buddhist customs and practices into the future. Honored and respected by people on earth and beings throughout the celestial realms, they would uphold the integrity of the sasana, following the tradition of the noble ones, so that it did not decline and disappear. Walking past him carelessly without respect were the pretentious ones who thought they already knew it all. They considered their own meditation to be even superior to that of their teacher, disregarding the fact that he had previously guided them all in its proper practice. They were not the least bit interested in showing gratitude for his tutelage in matters of Dhamma, because they already considered themselves to be clever experts in everything. And thus they behaved accordingly, which was ruinous, not only to themselves, but also to the entire sasana, including all the people who might come to them for guidance. Their minds poisoned by the errors of such monks, these people would in turn harm others and themselves, including future generations, without discovering whether they were on the right path or not. The next group consisted of those who waited for the chance to pass him, signaling the start of a bad attitude that would develop and have repercussions for the future sasana. Much like the previous group, they held a variety of erroneous views, causing harm to themselves and the religion as a whole. Together, they were a menace to the sasana, the spiritual focus of all Buddhists. Because they failed to rightly consider the consequences of their actions, the sasana was in danger of being utterly destroyed. The monks who pinched Acariya Mun's chest with pieces of split bamboo considered themselves to be astutely well-informed and acted accordingly. Despite their wrongful actions, they did not take right and wrong into consideration in thinking about their behavior. On top of that, they were bound to cause Buddhist circles and their teacher a great deal of discomfort. Acariya Mun said that he knew exactly who were among this last group of monks, and that they would cause him trouble before long. He was saddened that they would do such a thing, since they were his former disciples, who had his consent and blessing to spend the rains retreat nearby. Rather than treating him with all the respect he deserved, they planned to return and bother him. A few days later, the provincial governor and a group of government officials came to visit his monastery. The delegation was accompanied by the very same disciples who had led the assault on him in his vision. Without revealing his vision to them, he carefully observed their actions. Together, they requested his support in soliciting money from the local people in order to build several schools in the area. They explained that this would help the government. They had all agreed to approach Acariya Mun for assistance since he was highly revered by the people. They felt that the project would surely be a success if he were involved. As soon as he knew the reason for their visit, Acariya Mun immediately understood that these two monks were the principal instigators of this troublesome business. It was represented in his vision of the assault. Later, he asked both monks to come to him and instructed them in appropriate behavior for a practicing Buddhist monk, someone whose way of life is rooted in self-restraint and tranquility. This story is recounted here to help the reader understand the mysterious nature of the citta, how it is quite capable of knowing things both apparent and hidden, including knowledge of things past and future, as well as of the present. Acariya Mun exemplified this ability on numerous occasions. He conducted himself with total detachment. His thoughts never concealed any ulterior worldly motives. Whatever he said stemmed from his knowledge and insights and was purposefully spoken to make people think. His intention was never to fool credulous people or to cause harm. What is recorded here was told to his close inner circle of disciples, not just anyone. Thus, the writer might be showing bad judgment in exposing Acariya Mun's affairs. But I think this account offers those who are interested something useful to dwell upon. Among present-day Kammatthana monks, Acariya Mun's experiences stand out for being uniquely broad in scope and truly amazing, both in the sphere of his meditation practice and the insights derived from his psychic knowledge. Sometimes, when the circumstances were appropriate, he spoke directly and specifically about his intuitive knowledge. Yet, at other times, he referred only indirectly to what he knew and used it for general teaching purposes. Following his experience with the elderly monk whose thoughts he read during his stay at Sarika Cave, he was extremely cautious about disclosing his insights to others, despite his earnest desire to help his students see the errors in their thinking. When he pointed out candidly that this monk was thinking in the wrong way, or that monk was thinking in the right way, his listeners were adversely affected by his frankness. They invariably misunderstood his charitable intent instead of benefiting from it, as was his purpose. Taking offense at his words could easily lead to harmful consequences. Thus, most of the time, Acariya Mun admonished monks indirectly, for he was concerned that the culprits would feel embarrassed and frightened in front of their fellows. Without identifying anyone by name, he merely gave a warning in order to foster self-awareness. Even so, the culprit sometimes became terribly distressed, finding himself rebuked amid the assembled monks. Acariya Mun was very well aware of this, as he was of the most expedient method to use in any given circumstance. Some readers may feel uncomfortable with some of the things that are written here. I apologize for this. But I have accurately recorded everything that Acariya Mun related himself. Many senior disciples who lived under his tutelage have confirmed and elaborated on these accounts, leaving us with a vast array of stories. Generally speaking, external sense objects pose the greatest danger to practicing monks. They enjoy thinking about sights, sounds, smells, tastes, bodily contact, and mental images concerning the opposite sex. Though this is unintended, the tendency to do it is deeply ingrained in their personalities. Inevitably, these were the primary subjects of Acariya Mun's admonitions, whether given directly or indirectly. Monks had other kinds of thoughts, of course, but unless they were particularly serious, he wouldn't take much notice. The evening meeting was the most important time by far. Acariya Mun wanted the members of his audience to be both physically and mentally calm. He didn't want anything to disturb them or himself while he was speaking, ensuring that his disciples received maximum benefit from listening. If someone allowed wild, unwholesome thoughts to arise at that time, he was usually struck by a bolt of lightning, right in the middle of the thoughts that absorbed him, right in the middle of the meeting. This made the monk who dared to think so recklessly tremble and almost faint on the spot. Although no name was mentioned, Acariya Mun's disclosure of the content of the offensive thoughts was enough to send a shock through the guilty one. Other monks were also alarmed, fearing that in a moment of carelessness they themselves might fall prey to similar thoughts. When lightning struck continuously during the course of a Dhamma talk, his audience succumbed to the pressure and sat very attentively on guard. Some monks actually entered in a meditative state of complete tranquility at that time. Those who did not attain such a state were still able to stay calm and cautious from fear that lightning might strike again if their thoughts strayed, or perhaps the hawk they feared was swooping down to snatch their heads. For this reason, those monks residing with Acariya Mun gradually developed a solid foundation for centering their hearts. The longer they remained with him, the more their inner and outer demeanors harmonized with his. Those who committed to stay with him for a long time submitted willingly to his vigorous teaching methods. With patience, they came to understand all the skillful means he used, whether in the daily routine or during a discourse on Dhamma. They observed him tirelessly, trying to thoroughly follow his example as best they could. Their tendency to desire Dhamma and be serious about all aspects of daily practice increased their inner fortitude little by little each day until they eventually stood on their own. Those monks who never achieved positive results from living with him usually paid more attention to external matters than to internal ones. For instance, they were afraid that Acariya Mun would berate them whenever their thoughts foolishly strayed. When he did rebuke them for this, they became too scared to think of solving the problem themselves, as would befit monks who were training under Acariya Mun. It made no sense at all to go to an excellent teacher, only to continue following the same old tendencies. They went there, lived there, and remained unchanged. They listened with the same prefixed attitudes and indulged in the same old patterns of thought. Everything was done in an habitual manner, laden with kilesas, so that there was no room for Acariya Mun's way to penetrate. When they left him, they went as they had come. They remained unchanged. You can be sure that there was little change in their personal virtue to warrant mentioning, and that the vices that engulfed them continued to accumulate unabated. Since they never tired of this, they simply remained as so many unfortunate people without effective means to oppose this tendency and reverse their course. No matter how long they lived with Acariya Mun, they were no different than a ladle in a pot of delicious stew, never knowing the taste of the stew. The ladle merely moves repeatedly out of one pot and into another. Similarly, the kilesas that amass immeasurable evil pick us up and throw us into this pot of pain, that pot of suffering. No doubt, I myself am one of those who gets picked up and thrown into one pot and then into another. I like to be diligent and apply myself, but something keeps whispering at me to be lazy. I like to follow Acariya Mun's example, and I like to listen and think in the way of Dhamma as he has taught. But again, that something whispers at me to go and live and think in my old habitual way. It doesn't want me to change in any way whatsoever. In the end, we trust the kilesas until we fall fast asleep and submit to doing everything in the old habitual way. Thus, we remain just our old habitual selves without changes or improvements to inspire self-esteem or admiration from others. Habitual tendencies are an extremely important issue for every one of us. Their roots are buried deep inside. If we don't really apply ourselves conscientiously, observing and questioning everything, then those roots are terribly difficult to pull out. And we're going to end there today. We are on page 142. We are still in the last section of Chapter 2, titled An Impeccable Human Being, and we're going to resume on page 142 in the next recording, right about in the middle of the page where it takes a little bit of a turn. Have a wonderful day. Until next time, with metta. Bye-bye.